Chapter 237, back with another review. So my last video was the first in the series of American Guinea Pig, the first of 3 that I own. I will be getting the 4th film soon, Bouquet of Guts and Gore. So now we're going to move right on to part 2, American Guinea Pig Bloodshock from 2015. And like his predecessor, this was the official selection at Phil Anselmo's Housecore Horror Film Fest. And this is actually the first American Guinea Pig film that I had ever heard of. Seeing this at the store I shop at, this was when I found out about American Guinea Pig. I had already seen and owned the original Japanese series, so I was very surprised and curious to see the American Guinea Pig series. And it probably was around 2015 that I first saw this there. It just took me a very long time to get a hold of these. So, this one was directed by Marcus Koch, if I pronounced that correctly, who served as a special effects guy in the first film. Stephen Biro, who wrote and directed the first film, serves as writer and executive producer of this one. Also put out by Unearthed Films, because I believe Stephen Biro is or was head of Unearthed Films. A number of the same people are behind it. Melanie Dean was part of the first film. You have Koch returning as an effects guy with Kat Bernier. I'm not sure if Kat Bernier was in the first one. No, Kat Bernier was not in the first one as an effects person. But Melanie Dean was. And Melanie Dean is the production designer of this film. And it stars Dan Ellis, Andy Winton, Lillian McKinney, Gene Palubicki, and Norm Castellano, who I think passed away around the time that this was coming out, because the film is dedicated to his memory. I just want to see what else he was in, if anything. This tablet's so slow. Let's see. Endure, Kama Sutra, Dead of Night. He's in Song of Solomon, the 4th film in the series, so okay. I haven't seen him in anything else, but, oh wait. Of course, it clicked on a different person. No. He was in this and The Uh-Oh Show by Herschel Gordon Lewis. Okay. So, like the first film, this is following the torture motif, the sort of fake snuff film motif that Guinea Pig was built on, including the first 2 films. But like the Japanese series would do, this does incorporate a story, as vague as it may be. But still, don't go into it thinking there's going to be some sort of narrative or overall story or some revelation or solution at the end. I mean, I talked about it in my review for this film, is that a lot of people tend to go into these torture films or pseudo-snuff films, torture films, whatever, and get dock points for a lack of story, even though that's not what these are about. This one does have a bit more of a story than the first film, but it doesn't really add up to anything or amount to anything. Another thing that might turn off a lot of people is, yes, it is black and white. I, however, like that. I think that adds a lot to the atmosphere of this film, along with the score by Christian Day, which is very well done. But before I get to that, the story, if anything, you have a male patient, a nameless male patient, who is in this hospital, I guess, and is continuously brought from his padded cell to the doctor's room, which he must know he's not in a hospital, like a mental asylum or anything. The wall is all dirty bricks and paint. It looks like a rundown warehouse, if anything, but I don't think this guy's actually a doctor. Or he has the knowledge, but I don't think he's a licensed doctor. Who systematically tortures him in order to fill up a jar full of his blood, which we find out is because the doctor likes to inject himself with torture victims' blood, because he, I guess, gets high off of it. I guess whatever endorphins are released when being tortured is found in the blood, and it's some life-giving substance. It doesn't delve into it, it's not important, but we do get a couple scenes of him injecting it, looking like he's getting powerful. The movie really is just about this guy going back and forth from his cell to the torture room and back, and pretty much just seeing him kind of disintegrate. All the while, in between the seams of the mats in the wall, a female patient, a nameless female patient in the next cell, is able to pass notes through. And they start a correspondence with each other, passing each other notes. And they're really each other's only foot with reality and humanity. They're the only thing keeping each other going. That's the movie. That's really all it is. The black and white, the reason why I like it is because it really does give it this surreal, otherworldly, nightmarish kind of atmosphere, similar to how I felt what Human Centipede 2 did. And they both kind of gave me the same kind of surreal, nightmarish, otherworldly atmosphere as Eraserhead. So, you know, that atmosphere is one of my favorite aspects of Human Centipede 2, as bad of a movie as that might be. I do think this is a better movie than Human Centipede 2. But it does have that, you know, just it doesn't feel like reality. It feels surreal and dreamlike or nightmarish. But then when you add the score by Christian Day, which is not really music, but more of just this deep, dark, foreboding, ambient noises. Or just the sounds of like fuzz that just rises, or I mean, Human Centipede 2 did that. When Martin finally gets his centipede built, and he does that little dance with his cane, like that kind of music, that's all the music that's in this. It does help create dread. It does add to that nightmarish, surreal atmosphere. Although the cinematography could have done a bit more to make it more surreal, like maybe have some like crazy, either having it shaky or odd angles or like crazy zooms on faces or whatever. It is shot fairly straight. There are times where there are close-ups or it does get a bit shaky, but it doesn't get too wild with the cinematography to go with the atmosphere, which is fine. It definitely does look like a movie. It's not going for the aesthetic of a snuff film that you could find somewhere like this one or like the first two Japanese films. This one does feel like a movie with actors and effects and stuff like that. But it is pretty much non-stop torture throughout its 91-minute runtime. It is the longest of the three that I have as of right now. Now, for the main course, the torture, the effects, are they as good as this? Now, one is a totally different kind, because this is not necessarily a gore film like that one was. I think this one is going for more pain, suffering, the emotional toll, the psychological toll of being tortured. Which, spoiler alert, this scene with the scalpel to the eye isn't in there. They hold it up to his eye, but they don't do anything. I mean, the movie opens up with him getting his tongue cut out. It does start off small with the tongue being cut out, and it does work its way up. I mean, at one point there's like the thing with the handle with like the spinning wheel on the end with all these sharp spikes. He'll just graze that up and down his leg. They don't get one with 2 wheels. Kind of like a little tiny rototiller. It goes all the way up till there's one with 5 wheels. It goes all up and down his back with it. Every time he is tortured, whatever wounds are there, he rubs alcohol in. There are more reactions in the 2 victims than in the first 2, because the first 2 were drugged, so they just laid there. But they don't scream, they just kind of grunt or wince, probably because their tongues are cut out. Another thing I really like is that there's very, very little to no dialogue. The dialogue is really limited to just the doctor, played by Andy Winton. But even then, he just speaks a few words at a time, few and far between. And I don't know if it's the movie or if it was intentional, but there's a delay in the audio. So he'll be like, hold still. So I don't know if that was meant to help create, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, Kubrick was obsessed with it, especially in The Shining. Disorientation, or to help that surreal kind of feel, or if it's just something that happened. I don't know. It did kind of add to the atmosphere, though. But when there are effects, they are good. I mean, when we first see the female patient, she's got like the chest brace and the halo and everything. They cut her chest open, put the thing in to separate everything, and you can see her still beating heart that the doctor kisses. Great score with just like the muffled and that. You know, the effects look great, especially with the still beating heart and the lungs filling up, and the effects do look awesome. Then, you know, there's a lot of messing with bones, like with wire on the male patient, or even cutting a chunk out of a tibia, like that. Like, cutting him, there's a lot of cutting open and then pulling apart the cut all the way down to the bone, sawing out a chunk of tibia to put in like a little plate with screws. And of course, no anesthesia, fully awake and lucid, because they gotta get that endorphin-filled blood. You know, that's actually the scene with the tibia there. Also, teeth pulling, and the sound design is just as good as in the first film. Especially with the teeth pulling, you hear that crunching and that cracking, and then just the sound of the gurgling of the blood and the spit, just superb. Now, I will say, and I'm sure some people will agree, that the black and white does kind of dilute the effects, also dilute the kind of relativity. I mean, like, if you watch this film and you'll probably be more like, ooh, like, that's gotta hurt, that's fucked up. But here, where it's black and white, it kind of severs that relativity. It just makes it feel more like a dream, or like a music video, or, you know, just that link between you and what you're watching. It does kind of dilute that. But the black and white helps the atmosphere so much that I can't disagree with it. And I'm sure it does dilute the effects to some extent as well. But Yeah, it's definitely not an all-out gore bath like the first film was. It is definitely more um, meticulous with his torture and his gore. Uh, but, you know, I like how there's little to no dialogue. It does get a little repetitive. I mean, padded room, torture room, padded room, torture room, padded room, but now there's notes, torture room, padded room, more notes, it back and forth, back and forth. But and yeah, the story doesn't really go anywhere. Doesn't say why the doctor's doing this, what exactly he gets out of this blood, what does happen at the end. But that's fine. I don't look for deep stories in torture films like this. Saw is a different story. I mean, something. The whole thing about Guinea Pig is that they were made to show off whatever effects they were working with at the time and how they could use them. So whatever minimal, vague story, if any at all, is perfectly fine with me. I'm not looking for, you know, best screenplay in a Guinea Pig film. People really do need to let go of narrative and story for stuff like this. But, I mean, if I wanted all-out guts and just piles of intestines and everything, I can watch the first film. You do get a bit of that at the end of this film. But it was nice to see how they handled this sort of meticulous, smaller torture. Teeth, cutting out tongues, making incisions and fucking with the bone inside. One of his torture sessions is just taking a mallet to his knee and fucking his knee up. So it's a different approach. It's just as effective in its own way. I'd probably say this might be more enjoyable as a film. Definitely more artistic, and I'm not sure what they were trying to say, especially with the ending, but yeah, it might not have all the meaty, juicy effects of the first film, but I still like what they did, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah, it's kind of depressing, but I was still impressed by what they were able to do. It's still better than most of the Japanese films, and yeah, I can say I like August Underground, Jesus. American Guinea Pig, Bloodshock. So now I'm going to get into spoilers, because I do want to talk about the ending. The female patient is able to slip out of her restraints in the doctor's chair, grab a scalpel, stab him in the eye, slit the throat of the orderly, which no one in this movie is a good actor. I'll say that. The orderly's probably the worst. So then she doesn't kill the doctor. In fact, there's this weird scene where he's like, ah, oh, oh. And then he pulls it out. She goes back to the man's cell. And at first what looks like a nice embrace, like they're finding their humanity again, where they hug, they just kind of touch each other, they look at each other, you know, finally seeing the person that's been helping them through this ordeal. But then it just kind of goes nuts. It kind of goes like the ending to Sausage Party, but a guinea pig style, where they start looking over each other's, you know, wounds and gashes, and then they start kissing each other's wounds and cuts and gashes, licking, kissing, touching all over, and it becomes a blood orgy. They start biting the stitches out, and at this point the film gradually becomes more color, so that and more the editing gets faster. There's faster cuts, so there'll be like shot of them from this angle to that angle, then him having her up against the wall, and it just keeps cutting faster and faster, almost like it's swirling around them. As they get bloodier, 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 they start using each other's wounds or for sexual purposes. Because, like, she still has that slit here that went to her open chest cavity for her heart. Which, I don't know how... Yes, they would pass out before any of this happened. Yes, they probably would pass out or go into shock through any of that torture. Like, I don't even know if you can be lucid with your chest completely open all the way down to your heart. But for the sake of, you know, suspension of disbelief, let's just go with it. So they have this sort of the bloodiest sex scene I've ever seen, where they even start, like, fingering and rubbing the slits and pulling stuff out until they in the room is just completely covered in red. And then we go back to black and white, which is, it's kind of jarring. You kind of, because it's so vibrant in the white room with just that much red, that when it goes back to black and white, you kind of forget how black and white it was when you were watching it. And you realize just how much color was missing when it first gets fully back to color. Then it ends with the eye patch doctor cutting the tongue out of another guy, the Norm Castellano, the one who passed away, showing that the cycle's starting over. And then mixed with the end credits, we get backstory on the two patients. Like, he killed his wife with a screwdriver. She stabbed her mother while she was sleeping. And I don't know if that was supposed to take away the sympathy from them, or, you know, kind of show them just as evil, why they ended up in a place like this to begin with. I don't know. Maybe because if they put it in the beginning of the film, we wouldn't sympathize with them. I don't know what they were going for. I don't know what they were going for with the bloody sex scene either. As enjoyable as it was to watch, but... And I've seen so many, like, A24 IFC films that I want to think that there's something artistic trying to be said. But these movies are so straightforward and about the effects and the torture that I doubt it. It was probably just because. So yeah, there's definitely more to this film-wise than, say, Bouquet of Guts and Gore. It does drop the pseudo-snuff film aesthetic and approach, going for an actual film. I do like the black and white. It creates that surreal, nightmarish atmosphere. The effects, as great as they are, may be diluted by the black and white, but, you know, it's definitely more of a surgically meticulous type of torture than it was just blood and guts, just slaughterfest of this film. So it's just as effective in its own way, but I was still surprised by it. I liked it more than I thought I would. I really did enjoy American Guinea Pig Bloodshock. So that's the second film in the series, and next we have the last one I have, up until I get the fourth film, American Guinea Pig Sacrifice, which is the shortest, I think, of all of them, at only 63 minutes. So I do have more extreme films coming. I have some on order. I'm going to order a few more. Kind of have like a mini marathon going. I have some that I never got to that I could probably do as well. But yeah, I will get to the third and later the fourth American Guinea Pig film. So stay tuned for all that, and thank you for watching.